Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Major updates today as to the potential of new teams arriving onto the grid in the near future. 12 is the target of Formula 1 CEO Stefano Domenicali. Is it going to happen though, with a brand new Concorde Agreement being signed, such that the entry fee is going to go from what's currently $200 million-ish to more like $1 billion US? Is this feasible? Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. First of all, Mick Schumacher is in the Mercedes W14, or I think he's just got out of it actually, here in Barcelona today. Good morning from Barcelona, say Mercedes. Here's Mick in the car getting ready to go. Quite an important and ideal time for Mercedes to do these Pirelli tyre tests. So every team gets to do them over the course of the season. They have to do them at certain times. But if there's any time that Mercedes and Ferrari, the two teams that are doing them over the last couple of days, would want to do them, now is absolutely the ideal time. Both those teams have just brought new upgrades. Barcelona is, as we've said before, one of the ideal test circuits to have. So primarily this is for Pirelli and their new tyre compounds to try out. But also it's very important for the teams, especially Mercedes wanting to learn more about their car, and Ferrari as well, because those are the teams that have been allocated it right at this time of year, and it's worked out absolutely perfectly with when and where they are doing it with regard to what upgrades they've just brought. Maybe even more helpful for Ferrari, just because their car was a shambles this weekend. They've got to understand exactly why. Charles Leclerc was doing laps yesterday. I think this is probably the fastest lap that he did, a 1:18.2. George Russell at 151 laps. The fastest one that he did was a 1:18.4. So it's not about the times. Obviously, we know the Mercedes can go far quicker than that, and so can the Ferrari, as we saw this past weekend. But it's about data primarily for Pirelli on the tyres, but also for the teams themselves, what they can do with the car. They probably can't put like all the sensors they would like to have on. Fundamentally, it's not a test for the teams, but it will be useful getting 300 or so laps in over a couple of days for Mercedes and Ferrari in their cars is pretty good. It's also big for Mick Schumacher himself, because Russell was in the car on day one, and on the other side you've got Ferrari with Leclerc and Sainz. So Hamilton's not doing this. Mick Schumacher's in the car. Good to see. Did 152 laps today, Mick Schumacher. I'm guessing he didn't bid it in the wall, which is pretty challenging to do anyway around Spain, but still good to see nonetheless. And it will be quite an interesting litmus test for him, just to see, you know, what was the performance like. Russell's been in the car the day before. He jumps in today. What are his times like? You know, maybe we'll see over the coming days. Maybe a little bit of it gets leaked in terms of how competitive was he. Mercedes and Toto Wolff have been clear that they do want to get him in another seat. I think Toto Wolff said recently that realistically next season there's not going to be an opening there, right? Maybe at Williams for Sargent, but outside of that it's going to be tough to find Mick a seat. The year after, maybe there's a better chance, but it's cool to see Mick getting you know, some time in the car at the very least and driving around the track. Another big update today, a surprising one at that, coming from Alfa Romeo Sauber, confirming their new team will bring James Key in as their new technical director. He was recently the technical director for McLaren F1 team and was effectively fired from that role. To the best of our understanding, they made some serious changes internally there at McLaren because their team wasn't performing, obviously. James Key was making way, and I thought maybe that'll be him. You know, where's he going to go next in Formula 1? It was difficult to say, but instead, former colleague, I guess, Andreas Seidel, they worked together at McLaren relatively recently. He went on to join Sauber to kind of, you know, primarily instigate and push forward this Audi-Sauber integration that they will have over the coming years, and he's keen for James Key to come along. So I guess Seidel must believe Key was not the source of the issues necessarily at McLaren, and he wants James Key to come in and also work on the Audi-Sauber project, which is, again, quite a big, you know, role for him to have, especially since the onset, of course, of the 2022 regulation. So he also worked for Sauber, I believe, before several years ago, and now he's returning to that organisation. So that's pretty interesting. And also Alfa Romeo as a brand, of course, they're not going to be connected to Sauber much longer because Audi are coming in and they're going to take over from 2026. What Sauber are going to be called in 2024 and 2025, we don't really know right now. Maybe it's just going to be Sauber as it has been before, because Alfa Romeo, they're out of there. They don't want to be associated anymore, and they are supposedly taking their title sponsorship over to Haas as their brand new title sponsor. So that is apparently the plan, and it's going to be Alfa Romeo Haas from 2024, and it might just be Sauber until 2026 when the Audi relationship becomes official. So Audi have made their intentions very clear to join Formula 1. That is now absolutely happening, and we even know Honda are supplying engines to Aston Martin. So there's lots of interest for new teams and new manufacturers or old manufacturers that want to return to come back into the sport, and as such we may well be seeing from 2026 and beyond more teams on the grid. Maybe maybe even from 2025, who knows? But the plan is, from Stefano Domenicali, to add 2 more teams to the grid in the short term. That would be increasing the entry fees for the new teams from currently $200 million on the current Concorde Agreement up to roughly $1 billion. And that is apparently what is going on. And also, as he always likes to do, increasing the number of races. So he's added again, right, any opportunity possible to add more races onto the calendar, whatever the reasoning, he's going to go for it, whether that's more sprints, who knows, whatever. That's not the main topic of today, but we know that they want more races, despite the fact that the teams and the staff are absolutely being pushed right now to maximum possible capacity. These, though, are the key points with regard to the new teams. We know that Formula 1 is in a healthy spot compared to where it has been in the past, and there's many constructors that have come, they've gone in and out because they realise that, well, sometimes it's more of a black hole than other times. 2009, for example, when Honda said, you know what, enough's enough, we're gone, and then Braun won the championship with what was going to be that car. But yeah, so Formula 1's in a decent spot. We know that Audi are coming through, but we want really more teams on the grid, right? I know that many fans would like to see that, going back to 11, 12 teams or something of that ilk. And Red Bull have actually recently rejected an offer for AlphaTauri. We believe they were offered $800 million to sell AlphaTauri, but they decided not to, and that would previously have been, as Giuliano Guessa says in the article, unthinkable to not sell a team for that amount of money, but that seems to be in the ballpark of what it's going to cost now to enter into Formula 1. So the key point here is that teams will want to come in, but the current teams get a share of the prize money that's generated and distributed from Formula 1 themselves. So if you have 12 teams on the grid, that money is therefore diluted through the other teams. So to compensate for that, the new teams coming in will have to pay some sort of entry fee to subsidize what the other teams will lose from that dilution over the coming years. Now, obviously, you know, if you look at it over like a 50-year time span, then the entry fee is never quite going to count for that level of dilution, but they come up with a reasonable figure from their perspective. The current number that was set a few years ago now was about 200 million that the teams thought, you know what, if a team comes in and pays 200 million, that will at least cover our dilution for the next like 5 years or so, and that's reasonable enough. However, nowadays, it's a different story. The teams have no reason to accept necessarily another team to join if they're not sure that they can have a massive arrangement here from the dilutionary fees and the entry fees that will come in as a result. Apparently, Ferrari are actually quite keen for a new team to come in. That's what is said in the article. The big teams, such as Ferrari, are open to the entry of new teams. Now, De Kessler in this page has close ties to Ferrari, so I guess he can confirm that Ferrari are pretty open to the idea, and this also implies that Red Bull and Mercedes are also not opposed to the idea of new teams. They probably don't see, new teams as potential massive competition, but it's like, what can they add to the sport? Can they bring in a big manufacturer? For example, a Cadillac, General Motors, as in Andretti's case, has been a big discussion point. So that would be an interesting idea. But apparently, in order to enter now, 200 million, that's way too low. The way things currently stand with inflation and with what the teams want, it's more like $1 billion. Günther Steiner from Haas has apparently said there are more intense conversations about this new agreement. The sooner it is finalized, the better for everybody. So this is the thing, right? And we saw Michael Andretti recently, I think Miami or whatever, was discussing the possibility that, at least they're working, right, on bringing Andretti onto the grid. They've got this partnership with Cadillac and General Motors and all this stuff, and they're trying to make it happen. There's also the rumours of a high-tech team, which was, I believe, registered sometime last year, and there's been rumours they've actually been working a little bit with Mercedes or something like that anyway, maybe using the Mercedes facilities or something in and around Silverstone to prepare for a potential entry as well. So there's a few teams interested, probably 3 or 4, maybe even more teams that are interested. I believe the FIA has now closed the applications, so anyone that wants to apply, if you guys wanted to apply for a Formula 1 team and you've got $1 billion lying around, unfortunately the window is now closed for you, so that's a little bit unfortunate. But they will now review all the teams, and then they will say, hey, we're interested in bringing you into the sport. Have you got $1 billion to pay? Once the teams agree if that figure is going to be correct. So they're trying to come up with a new Concorde Agreement such that the entry fee will be raised substantially, which would then be distributed to the teams to compensate for the dilution of all of that type of stuff that we just went through. So what do you guys think about this? 12 teams on the grid. It would be nice if there was another couple of spots spots open for other drivers and stuff like that. And right now the field is very competitive as is, and especially from 2026 and beyond, you would expect that to be especially the case with the budget cap and the wind tunnel testing time and all these other features that we have seen over the last several years coming together. And the field spread this year is actually very narrow after the Red Bull. Just a couple of things to mention here before we close out. Speaking of the Red Bull, actually, this is one of the first times, or maybe the earliest time ever, that we have really seen a race where, I mean, we're only 7 rounds in, but yet there were 0 changes in the championship standings after that Grand Prix. So everything stayed as it was. Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Sainz, Leclerc, etc., etc. Nothing changed after Spain, which is pretty rare, to be honest, given how close the margins are down, especially in the second half of the table, where any point usually could make some sort of difference. Helmut Marko has also commented on the possibility of Red Bull winning every race. That is now a key talking point, because at the start of the season, when George Russell said, I think he said after Bahrain, that Red Bull are going to win every race, and people were like, oh, well, that seems a little bit ambitious for him to say, but now we are at round 8 of the season, 7 races in with no Imola, and they have won every race pretty comfortably at that. Even when they had an off weekend in Australia, they were still 10 seconds ahead of the rest of the field, and that's before the safety car came out, which kind of confirmed the results. Well, it was a red flag actually, but finished under the safety car, you know what I mean. So Helmut Marko says, can we win every race? It might be possible if Max has a problem or an accident and Checo can step up if he's in good form. So basically saying that, like, you know, if they are going to do it, Max will have some sort of issues, you would think, eventually, and you know, can Checo step up to be there to claim the Red Bull win? But you know, for now they're focusing on getting their 100th Grand Prix victory in Montreal, which is coming up just next weekend, and then Spielberg in Australia, kind of a home race for them shortly after that. So very much intrigued your thoughts in the comment section below. This is Horner today at Downing Street to discuss something or another. It's actually not photoshopped as much as it does look like that is the case, but hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.